being compliant is expensive, try being uncompliant.
You will still require human sign-off, and that for us is where we use services like yourselves to come and present us data to then sit there and go, is this the correct client? Is this the correct information about you? There are humans in this process, so we have to try and make it easier for them rather than just say, please just have another form to key in more data.
ABC Limited, is that you? Versus a web form which is, tell me who you are, what I'm going to do, because essentially with that data, you're going to have to then key it into a system, and then you've got the issues around data quality, data duplication, so on and so forth. So I think it's a really, really interesting point.
But we still need accountability of when someone goes to meet the client, they have a view of the client relationship with Kennedy's, what they do today, how many matters, what's the billing ratios, what's our WIP, what's due, etc. That information needs to be at their fingertips wherever they are in the world.
You've got interlocked companies, you've got webs of UBOs, you've got shell companies, so on and so forth. Lots of things changing at a daily basis. It's now more important than ever to adopt that perpetual side of KYB.
If one of our partners is going to meet a global client relation, they should know everything that we do as a firm globally with that. I don't want to work with providers. I want to work with partners, because in all transformation programs we've probably all been involved in, they've never gone to plan, there's been issues, there's been challenges, and it's how you work with that partner.
Arslan Abbasi, and today we are hosting a live webinar with our beautiful co-hosts Alicia, Mark Williams, Kaylee from Smell Compliance. And today we're hosting a webinar on why top law firms are digitizing their onboarding and AML compliance. And we're going to be covering some of the challenges, some practical tips. And without further ado, I'll just pass it to my colleagues to introduce themselves, and we get right into the debate. Alicia, would you like to go first? Tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yes, so I'm Alicia Tooth, and I'm the Business Acceptance Manager at Gately. I've been at Gately for about 7 months now, but before that, I was actually the Compliance Manager at a regional law firm for 3.5 years. And also before that, I was in the insurance industry for 14 years. So a wealth of compliance knowledge. I'm also a co-host for the Compliance Collective with my fellow member here today, Kaylee.
Amazing. Kaylee, if you want to go next.
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Kaylee Smale. I run my own consultancy, Smell Compliance, where I support law firms with all things AML and compliance. I've worked in the legal sector for over 16 years now. And have about 13 years risk and compliance experience, starting out as a conflicts and AML analyst in an international law firm and then growing into a specialist role where I try to make AML just that a little bit less boring, as others might put it, because I don't see it boring. So I'm a bit of an AML geek. I really love what I do. You can tell with my mug, but I'm really passionate about helping law firms.
Sweet. And Mark?
Yes, hi everyone. Firstly, thanks for joining. I'm Mark Williams, the CRO at Red Flag, where we help law firms transform their onboarding processes from a compliance KYB perspective. My focus is on how law firms can use technology like ourselves to meet their AML obligations through faster client onboarding. So looking forward to today's session.
Thank you. Thank you all for your introductions. As you guys can see, we have an incredible level of experience and expertise here. Both Alicia and Kaylee have worked decades in legal professional services, advising in-house on how to deal with onboarding and AML compliance, which are some of the biggest problems we have for law firms today. And there was a recent SRA report that came out with lots of interesting stats about non-compliance, particularly where that is. So if we could start holistically and look at a very high level, how are firms, law firms particularly, onboarding clients today? Let's say a regional practice, full service law firm, big top 200 firm. How are they currently onboarding? Let's say from point of engagement letter signed, all the way to monitoring and risk assessment being completed. Alicia and Kaylee, would you like to tackle this one?
Yeah, Lucia, you go first. You're in it at the moment, so.
So for me, I've got obviously the two flips of the coin. So the regional firm, there is quite a lot of paperwork still being done. It's not very consistent across the board. Different teams are doing different types of onboarding. I feel like I've come into an international law firm and they are looking at centralising the departments. I think that is key, making it standardised and consistent across the board. I think a lot of work is being done with how they onboard the client and making sure the client information is correct. Because if you standardize that approach and then do different matters for that client, it makes it easier and obviously improves the client journey.
Yeah, definitely. So from a consultancy sort of point of view, like I see so many different processes across different firms, from outsourcing to a third party, in-house centralized CDD teams, to, then you have support staff and fee earners doing it. And even when firms do have centralized teams, some parts of the process may still sit with the fee earner, things like source of funds and source of wealth. And I've also seen firms where they have different processes, like Alicia said, for different departments. So, anything that's outside the scope of the money laundering regulations, so your employment, your litigation, maybe your family, they might have a different process to what other people have. And then you also have the firms where it's just a free-for-all, no one really knows what they're doing, and everyone's just doing their own thing. And they only find out when I come in and start doing an audit or having interviews with staff, going, oh, you're doing something completely different. So I think, like Alicia said, having a clear process for someone to follow, whoever's doing it, is really, really important.
And I think from a technology perspective, that's kind of what we're seeing as well. It's a lot of fragmented processes. And this goes across all size of firms, legacy tech stacks, trying to keep up with the ever-changing environment that we have today. Lots of duplication as well. I think you both touched on that, which is ultimately increasing the costs. But we also come across a lot of law firms struggling to use the tech that was, well, let's say, fit for purpose 5 or 6, 7 years ago, and trying to utilize that in today's environment, which that is a struggle. We're having a lot of law firms come to us explaining that legacy processes are not working in today's environment.
Yeah, I think some people, they end up inheriting. So like Alicia could have gone into her firm and inherited stuff and just gone with it because that's what the firm's already done. And I know that's not something you would do, because you're there to go, right, this is what we can change, this is what we can make better. But I think that legacy thing is an issue. And also, they've had technology for so long, they don't even know how it works properly, or they don't even know who they can go to at the tech company to find out what's changed, if anything's changed. Are we using it correctly? And I think that's really important, that you have a really good relationship with your tech providers, so you do really understand how it works and where the information is coming from.
I totally agree with that. I definitely inherited a very archaic platform when I was at the regional firm, and it was very clear and evident that bolt-ons had been added to it. So again, in regards to processes, it made it clunky, and you can see the frustrations on both the client and also the fee earner side, because they're doing questions or answers that aren't necessarily relevant anymore. So it is really important to work with the tech providers and make sure the product you've got is fit for purpose, because at the end of the day, we are all trying to achieve the same thing, and it just helps if the product's doing what we need it to do as well.
Yeah, it can almost become like a bit of Jenga. You move one thing out and the whole system falls apart. So I can also understand why law firms are apprehensive to change. But yeah.
Just on that, I guess when you look at a smaller firm and the firm size of top 100 firms, what's the striking difference you see in their culture, in how they approach onboarding?
I think
Smaller
sorry, ladies first.
Oh, no, you carry on. I think you've got a good point that you're going to say.
Yeah, the misalignment, I feel, is a big challenge, even in the smaller firms, because they're all trying to, you'll have a little bit of litigation, corporate and family, but the misalignment of what they're using and what the process is, they're obviously all governed by compliance, but are they all talking to each other, each department? Then they're probably all using different providers, so they're all getting different results. So obviously they're trying to remain compliant and consistent, but it's difficult if they're not aligned.
Yeah. I think with small firms as well, they don't have a compliance team, and their MLRO is usually wearing more than one hat. So they could be the head of conveyancing as well. So it can be really tricky for them to actually find the time to sit down and say, look, we need to look at our tech stack. We need to look at the technology that we're using. Because it's a big project, isn't it? It is a big project to, make sure that you're doing it right. And I find often with the smaller firms, it's basically the first person that maybe has reached out to them, when people are trying to sell technology, the first person that's reached out to them and said, we've got this amazing technology, they've gone, oh, great, yeah, we'll just get you, because we don't have time to look at anything else. And I think smaller firms definitely do struggle, and they need a bit more help.
And you touched on another point there as well, Kaylee, doing it right. They don't necessarily know whether they're doing it right. And I think there's enough technology out there now to actually support them, so they know they've got a good risk assessment process in. And as long as it's aligned throughout the firm, they should be able to trust the products that they're using.
Just for Alicia, when you move from, I guess, relatively a commercial boutique practice to such a huge firm, was it easier to get things streamlined? Was it easier to kind of work with the process and improve it due to budget, due to more resources? Or was it easier in the smaller firm due to more ability to get things going and less people in your way? Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I think Alicia may be struggling.
No one can hear me. Alicia, while you're getting that fixed, Kaylee, do you want to speak on that? The difference between big firms in resources, budget, but having people in your way, but in smaller firms not having people in your way, but lack of budget, lack of resources.
Yeah, so I think they're both really good points and both real issues for law firms. I think, like you said, the bigger ones there's so many red lines that you have to cross to be able to get something put forward. I think it depends as well on who's actually driving the project. So if you've got someone who has, it could be that it's a big international law firm, but actually they're in there, they're on the board, they've got, people behind them that will listen to them. They're a decision maker, then it makes it really easy for them to get through. But say you're, the compliance manager, that could be like 5 lines down in the process, then actually that makes it really difficult for them to get something moving quickly in terms of having something like this either changed or implemented. In the smaller firms, I think cost is potentially an issue for them more than anything, is making sure that it's cost effective. But I think what some small firms forget is that they can actually, pass those costs on to their client. And actually, someone posted about it today on LinkedIn. It was in the SRA's source of funds and source of wealth thematic review. You can actually pass those costs on to the client. So it's just making sure that the smaller firms might not have so much of an issue if they can do that. But I think as well, it comes down to having a process for every single team. Some of the things that I hear is that, well, we're just creating a wheel for them, and actually it's going to cost, like, we're going to be adding a third onto their costs, because we want to do this ID identification and verification, through a technology provider. So it can be quite tricky as well to like weigh up what are we doing? Should we do the same for all teams, or actually it doesn't make commercial sense for us to do that? So there's a lot of things that law firms need to think about.
Cool. Alicia, are you back?
So can you hear me again? Am I back? Yeah. Yeah, so what I was going to say, my old regional fee did actually charge an onboarding fee. From being in the insurance industry for many years, an administration fee to update your address or change your name, commercial sense to me for why aren't we passing on? We are obviously checking, verifying documentation. The post office charge if you go and get your passport verified. So it made sense. So for me, I think the small firms, yes, there is a budget. Budgets are an issue, but I think by being pragmatic with what you've got and being proactive just really supports you in making it a better process for your clients, because at the end of the day that is key. If they get a good impression from the start, it does help the relationship you have with them for the entirety that you have them as a client.
And Mark, you've seen probably thousands of professional firms, right? In your time, thousands is an understatement. So what do you notice when you're talking to SMEs, not presuming that you do talk to SMEs, but what's the big difference between them in culture and implementation, right? So Kaylee mentioned that culturally they're different and they might not actually know procedurally what to do, but even if they have processes, they might not do it. So what do you notice? What are the changes that are different there?
Definitely see budget is always a highlight, and I don't not just seeing that across law firms. I think that's across a lot of other industries as well, because compliance is becoming quite expensive, and so also quite a scary topic for the smaller firms. But I think adapting products from a technical perspective, so smaller firms can get easier access to them, that are helping them with full journeys and showing value from that perspective. Whereas if it takes 48 hours to onboard an individual in a small law firm and technology can do it within an hour, that time difference there, the 2 days of waiting for more documentation to come through, it's calculating that to the smaller SMEs, which RegTech we deal with. We deal with both sides businesses. The larger law firms, it's real technology driven. They are looking to bring departments together. It's a longer process, but obviously they understand the importance of making sure that it's one, compliant, two, it's good for the end user. And I mean, the actual clients at the end user from a brand reputation perspective. No individual wants to be sending documentation on multiple occasions to be onboarded by any firm. So, yeah.
Just on that, I had a law firm send me a questionnaire on Word document, and my first impression was I don't want to work with you. I'm done right there and then, because you realize how quick it is to. I'm a bit snobby, and of course, if I have money, I'm gonna pick where my money is spent, right? So, as a client, I'm not gonna pick a law firm that is really outdated in its onboarding, because I can then expect that their order processes are going to be quite traditional, and I don't want a heavy bill at the end of it because all of the workload was manual.
Yeah.
And they're going to charge me for £10 for EIDV, £18 for when they could have gone to company's house for one employee. Not all businesses are complex. The local butcher shop doesn't have a trust in BVI, so doesn't necessarily need to uncharge always. So I've always had this problem with firms where their costs are quite inaccessible to local population and smaller businesses, and adding compliance on top, they obviously uncharging that makes it even more difficult. But also the lack of wanting to improve your onboarding as a business. If you look at banks, what they done is they enabled you to not come into the branch store where you need to hand in your address and bring a bunch of files, including your passport. They made it so you can onboard in 2-3 minutes. And
yes,
that in itself has improved their intake and made global banks accessible to people outside their jurisdiction, to people who can't come into the branch for whatever reason. And law firms, I think, need to do that. Now, I want to pinpoint with you guys. Mark, did you want to comment on that?
No, I think we are seeing that law firms are looking to
Yeah,
scale
I
more.
tried to say the same. I was like, yes, they
Yeah,
are. They are
100%, yes.
definitely doing that. Yes.
I think it's that. Unfortunately, it might sound a little bit negative, but it's that kind of ethos of evolve or dissolve. And if they're not moving with the
Right.
technology, unfortunately, there's a lot of acquisitions in the space. But they're going to need to get tech ready to move, and we are seeing that. We are seeing businesses take on more technology. So, yeah.
I think we mentioned this before in our discussions. For me, it's also about retaining staff. So we've got lots of younger people now coming into the industry. They've lived with their iPhones. I mean, we didn't have phones when we were younger. I'm just assuming everyone's about the same age as me, but we didn't have phones when we were really young. And we definitely didn't have a smartphone. So we've got all of these young lawyers coming into the profession, and then they end up with like looking at something that's like Windows 90. That they're just like, what is this? This is not what we're used to. So I think in terms of like retention of staff as well, actually making sure that the processes are as slick as possible will really help on that end as well. So it's not just about, and the end customer is definitely, like, the end client is very important, but also I think staff retention is something that law firms will struggle with if they don't start looking at their technology and their tech stack.
Alicia, do you want to get in
Investing
here as
in
well?
your people is definitely, yeah, investing in the people is key. I created a champions team. So when I was looking at streamlining the process, I was getting people involved. I want to know the frustration. What is the bits of the product? I can't get out of the back, so we are using this product, but how can I make it so it's better and more user friendly for you? And the engagement you get is you do get people engaged, and once you get people's buy-in and investment, they do help drive it, and they do help you drive it with the hierarchy as well in regards to the products that they use. So definitely agree with retention of staff. It can impact that as well.
Yeah, I just had a quick question for everybody here. We have two great questions from the chat. Would you like to leave it at the end, or would you like to address them as quite relevant to the topics we're discussing? How do you feel about it?
Yeah,
Happy to do them now.
ask away.
Yeah,
Ask away. Cool.
away.
We have, please don't verify how I'm going to say this, but this lady asked, a key frustration is that the fees incurred in the onboarding process can at times be disproportionate to the fees for the work. How can we work on improving this for better collaboration?
Yeah, so this is what I mentioned, wasn't it, about the will issue. But yeah, Alicia, you can.
Yeah. So when our onboarding fee, that is exactly what I looked at. I looked at every type of work that the firm did, because we did do work that was in scope and out of scope. And then we took a pragmatic view on what we thought was acceptable, what was being charged across the board, and did see it as an administration fee. So you do have to look at it. I have seen fees that are astronomical, over £100-200, but I think if you actually look at the product and its purpose, then you're not doing the on fee to make money. You're doing it to support the journey, the compliance team and the business. So I think yes, I can see that people can charge excess money, but I think it is really important that you charge what's considered reasonable for what it's doing.
Yeah, I think it's important to note as well that you're not allowed to make a profit when you're charging your clients for an onboarding fee. And that's one thing that's made clear. I think it could be with the smaller firms, obviously they want to charge back the cost that they're being charged by the provider. And I think that's where the issue probably comes in, that, we're feeling like this is a disproportionate to the work that we're doing. But again, like Alicia said, if it comes to that, maybe it could be that you only foot some of the cost if you feel like that you don't want to charge the full amount back to your clients.
Sorry, I wanted to come in here as well, say a few words. One is, it's good to do a research on terms and conditions of like 10, 20 law firms. they usually will stipulate what they're charging on charging to their customer on EIDV on a company house check. I once saw a firm try to get away with putting 120 there for EIDV when all the other firms were putting 12 to 15 pounds as a range. So you immediately get to see what some firms are doing. And Kaylee, even though they can't make profit, it does seem like some of them are trying to get away with it anyways. And the firm I'm speaking to was not charging 120 for the whole process. It was 120 just for the electronic document verification that we know, the likes of vendors provide. But Mark, there's a really good question here. Sorry, did you want to intervene?
No, that's fine. Go on, next one.
I was just going to say there's a really good question here that came in from Luke here. Can the onboarding for individuals be the same as for neobanks, i.e. Monzo, Revolut, i.e. using technology like OneID, IDVest, these sorts of tools? Can a law firm and a bank have similar kind of setup for individual onboardings?
I think we've seen a big change of how law firms are adapting technology that financial services are using. Financial services, I'm going to use the word COVID, apologies. Without digitally onboarding at that point, we would have seen even more companies going insolvent. But they adapted very quickly. So absolutely, we are seeing law firms, small and large, utilizing similar technology. That's what we are creating, is that digital onboarded from a risk assessment form. You mentioned the Word doc that you received. That would be very disappointing. But digitalizing from that part and bringing a lot of departments together so they've all got their own digital onboarding forms. And then, yes, using similar technologies, as we've mentioned there.
Yeah, I think biometrics. I think biometrics are definitely key for law firms at the moment, making sure that they have that, especially with the guidance and even the money laundering regulations saying that, you might have a remote client, but if you're using something like, technology that has biometrics, then that lessens the risk. Remote clients are seen as high risk, but actually you can lessen that risk if you're using technology, and that would satisfy your onboarding needs. So I think, things like having certified ID is probably going to become a thing of the past with a lot of firms. And I've even, I'm speaking to a small firm at the moment, and they're really trying to move all of their clients onto the electronic verification, but they have quite a lot of elderly clients who want to come into the office still. It's quite a small village that they work in. They still want to come into the village. And I said, well, why don't you do things like some firms are having an iPad at the desk or a phone at the desk where they can do it digitally with them whilst they're there. So they're still getting, the comfort that they need in terms of having the biometrics and checking the passport isn't fake. And even some technology providers as well, they will have a set process for if you do meet the person face to face, so you can still check whether the passport is valid. So there are lots of different ways and things that you can do to make sure that you can use that technology still.
And it's a great point on the demographic, because it's the same as geo. Making sure that you can identify documents globally. It's a big part for especially the larger law firms that are dealing overseas, identifying from a KYB perspective to a UBO perspective, then utilizing this technology to do that EDD.
Alicia, do you want to get in here and explain a little bit about Gately and big firms and EIDV, and can it be replicated like a bank? Can big firms have similar setups where you can quickly onboard people?
I definitely think you can. I'm not sure if any law firm is actually there yet, but technology is the way forward. We, as Kaylee said, in my old firm, we had got to the point where we had a iPad, and if clients were coming in, then we were onboarding them with them, because, I think my oldest person to date has been 89 that has managed to onboard themselves electronically. So I think, it is the way of the future. Technology is something that law firms are going to have to get on board with. To have everything stored centrally, you can have a data depository which establishes holistically your risk at any one point, how many PEPs you've got, how many high risk jurisdictions. So you have got all of that data clear and available to you at any point. obviously with the news about the AML regulations and the FCA, this information having it at hand and being monitored regularly is going to become something that is going to be required. So I think if you're using the technology how you should and retaining data, then you'll be in a very good stead for when the changes are implemented.
If I can add a few as well here, I think when you look at the different industries that there are, insurance, financial services are a lot more ahead, and their regulations are a little bit more tighter. So obviously they've had to have risk scoring, risk assessment for years. They've had to have EIDV for years. So they've built these flows, these infrastructures where you can onboard people in a minute or two, and it is super, super slick. And the technology providers for legal are quite catching up with the regulation itself. So the initial legacy providers were quite rudimentary, were quite basic, right? They did a couple of things, maybe a screening, maybe a very basic UBO check, but they didn't go further than that. Whereas in banks, you have tools that can tell you whether Arslan has been mass registering on company's house and how many other entities he's involved in, and then the risk levels of each of those entities, right? So they go a lot more deeper, and I think law firms have yet to touch on the importance of data and how slick they can make their onboarding. And just to give you guys some example, you could have a form on your website that immediately onboards and takes care of the EIDV, takes care of all the matter related question or the geo related questions, that asks for the KYB document. By the time the KYB document comes to Alicia, it's already verified through OCR technology that extracts the data, runs various checks on various databases. So you could have setups, but obviously it takes 6 months to draw the setup, bring consultants to tell you, to benchmark the market, to tell you what vendors to look at that could satisfy that, to bring compliance consultants like Kaylee to tell you, is this even compliant? Are there gaps in the process that you need to bring in? So it can be done. It just takes a very long time to an actual focus. But Mark, we had a conversation with Kennedy's that actually did that with you guys. Do you want to talk about what you guys did for them and how you kind of made it like a bank for them?
Yes, of course. So we started with litigation, which was very high transactional volume. So it was at one point, 50 people sat on seats doing manual AML checks, which is quite time consuming. But you're also relying on humans to be able to do that. So what we did was digitalize that full journey. So from an application form perspective, straight from an ERP system, work through that process through an AML IDV, and then making sure that data went back into the CRM. There are still bottlenecks in some of these journeys, but what we've tried to do is help them with things like refers. Alicia mentioned tax and sanctions. We always get that first question of, well, what do we do with refers? Can somebody work them for us? Well, that still sits with the law firms to go through, but narrowing it down so they are, so there's not so much fuzzy matching being done in that process. So again, just making sure that the digital part is taking as much as the manual work out of that process. The humans still need to look at the results at some point, but it's a lot faster. Obviously, you're talking about onboarding 10,000 individuals a day rather than 300. So yeah, that's kind of what we've been doing in one project, and then we've taken another project where we've gone full onboarding from a KYB globally. So we've looked at how you identify a business, whether it's UK, Europe, but also streamlining how we get down to the UBO and following the same process then of identifying them through IDB and biometrics. We're doing a full workflow on the corporate side as well. And again, we're using a lot of data sources within the technology to be able to deliver that. I don't think there's one provider that can say, right, we've got all the data in-house. We are utilizing different tech to be able to deliver it to our clients. We see this regularly. There's a new pop-up saying they've absolutely nailed it. We've got this technology correct. But you have to work with different partners, especially in different jurisdictions, to be able to deliver the full end-to-end.
Yeah, KYP is quite a tricky one. So corporate client due diligence is a really tough one. I know there's a few comments that I've just seen popping up about it, and how can you guarantee the client experience? It can be it could be quite tricky going through. So yeah, here's the comment here, and they're right. At the moment, they do go through different processes every time they engage a different party, or hopefully not within one law firm. I would hope that they probably would go through the same process within one law firm. But I would say that corporate client due diligence it can be one of the trickiest ones, because you just never know where it's going to take you. So you could, your starting point is always the company that you're acting for, but it can take you off on all sorts of different routes. And, as was mentioned earlier, it's could go off to different jurisdictions as well. Do those jurisdictions have transparency? Don't they have transparency? Delaware, you're not going to get any information from there. There's a reason why people, register their companies in Delaware. So it can be quite tricky, and it's really difficult. It can be difficult to, create that great experience for a client. I think what's really important in those situations is just meeting client expectations. So at the start, letting them know that actually this, you've got a corporate entity. We may need to come back to you for further information. We may need to have more information on this. Just really making sure. And I had someone before who, when she speaks to her clients, which I really liked, and she said to them, look, sometimes this part of the process can be a bit tricky, but let's work together on this so we can get this done as quickly as possible and as pain-free as possible. So I think it's just making sure that, there is that expectation. You kind of give that expectations to clients at the start to be able to make sure that the client experience doesn't get fragmented, the client doesn't get annoyed with you, because actually you've already told them at the start that, sometimes you might need to ask for more information. And I think the worst thing anyone could do, which I talk about all the time, is say sorry to a client. It's my pet peeve. Please don't say sorry to them, because you're actually making out that what you're doing is something that you don't like doing or you think is wrong. And actually, no, you're doing this because, yes, there is a legal requirement, but also you want to keep your clients safe. You want to keep the firm safe. You want to keep yourself safe. You want to keep your community safe. By doing these checks. And I think going at it a different point for you, so like we all need to work together to do this. We want to make sure that money laundering is bad, and we want to make sure that this doesn't happen. And in order for us to do that, we need to make sure that we check every single person that comes through our doors.
I think also to add to that, Kaylee, I think using your fee earners is really important. They are such a valuable source of information when it comes to know your businesses, know your clients, because they know information that they just don't see it as it can help the compliance team, but it can be invaluable. So I think educating the fee earners to know that actually you want to have these conversations, because they may know the information, they just haven't written it down yet. A lot of the times they've got really long-standing businesses, clients, corporate clients, and they know all this information, it's just not written anywhere. So education piece is really key with the fee earners, because we are all trying to work together. Like Kaylee said, fraud and AML, it's a massive risk, and we want to not just only protect our clients, we want to protect our business. And also I've noticed, because a lot of business strategies at the moment, there's a lot of other areas of the business. So understanding your client, you can help other areas of the business and grow in that way. So if they understand the reasoning behind the questions, you do get a lot of fee earners engaging with you. I have fee earners that actually call me up, ask me questions, and they go in with seeing their clients more prepared to have these conversations, because soft skills is a skill. To obtain information is a skill, and I'm not necessarily sure all fee earners are great at that at the start, but we can work together to achieve it.
I think it's really important as well, when you are building these onboarding, we call them orchestration flows or workflows, is to have those part of that process, as many people as you can, because they will spot something that you will potentially forget. And we try to bring in as many people from an organization to be part of those discussions.
If I could add on a few words here as well, which I will anyways. The legal design, I think, could be implemented in how you train your fee earners to know what to do next on any procedure. I've seen lots of compliance documents that I'm just like, if I was a fee earner, I'm done. I'm not reading this. I have enough on my plate. This and it's not clear either, right? So it's scenario based, and you want to know, what do I do in this scenario? And it's not that complex. Compliance documents can make it look complex, but really what you need to do is grab your IDV, send this particular questionnaire titled this, do this KYB check, do the source of fund, do the risk. It's procedural, and that process could be bullet pointed or designed in a way where it's a lot more visually telling. Couple of tools that I've seen have done a good job in their settings tab, allowing you to create departments and workflows. So they allow you to create a property department, and you could say, I'm onboarding as a property lawyer, and it will have your engagement letter from property department. It'll have property questions. It'll have conveyancing related EIDV stuff. So it'll take you through a very particular flow. And that's how you ensure that different departments are standardizing and have the same look on their onboarding. Another thing that Luke is asking for is, how does a corporate actually ensure that they're going through the same experience themselves? So if I'm onboarding with a law firm, accounting firm, and a property firm, I want to have the easiest experience possible and not have to have accounting do a different check and bunch of questionnaires, law firm do a bunch of different ones. We will get to a point where we have digital wallets, where a couple of vendors are working on it. It's a long way, but eventually each entity and individual will have their own digital identity on their iPhone, and then that's how you will update and ensure that whenever you're on board with an entity, it's as smooth as possible. You just share that link with them. Any thoughts on digital wallets, what I just said, with how you ensure consistency?
Digital wallets. It's well, we're still fairly new, right? Although we've been talking about them for a few years. Are they going to change that much? Because they are, quite country specific. If we think, yes, we've got them in the UK, we'll always go back to multiple documents rather than just being stuck to one. Otherwise, there could be friction in that onboarding process. And we want to eliminate any friction. If you've got an individual that doesn't have a passport, which is a possibility, but they have a European ID card, or a travel card, a permit card, we need them to be able to utilize those as well. So we're removing any more friction from that onboarding.
Cool. I'll move on to the next topic. And by the way, guys, thank you so much for these comments. Bring them along. Chat, if you could press 1 in the comment section. Let us know who's here. We might do a giveaway. I'm feeling generous. I might give a baggie of saffron if I'm feeling lucky today. But guys, we're going to move to the next point, which is the biggest bottleneck in the process. So you've all seen it. You've all experienced it. What do you think is the biggest bottleneck in onboarding for law firms today?
I'm happy to go first on that one. I think it's multiple tech stacks that don't speak to each other, and multiple departments using different data providers or different tech to try and do the same, try and get the same outcome. And again, we touched on this earlier on about products that were fit for purpose 5-6 years ago, and just trying to use them in today's age and not changing them and trying your best to work with them, it causes so many delays. So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing that we are seeing when we're speaking to law firms.
It did surprise me that a lot of the systems, they don't speak to each other. So you are duplicating work because you're having to copy something off one database and input it into another database. And for me, it's just from being underwriter, that's risk in general, because you're putting it back in the hands of human error, whereas what you're trying to do by using technology is eliminate certain risks. So I definitely agree. Technology, I think, because law firms are accustomed to using certain products, they don't necessarily see that if it's not broke, why fix it? So they retain that product, but it's not fit for purpose anymore. You need to make sure you're looking at, is it the best way your staff can utilize their time? Is it is there duplication happening, and is there a risk? Because obviously those are the types of things that you want to try and eliminate to make your firm more productive.
Yeah, I worked in tech last year for a year. Took a year out. I call it my gap year. I went and worked in tech, and integration has become more. It's something that law firms want. It's not a nice to have anymore. It is a must. Like,
They
it
need it,
needs to
yeah.
integrate with our case management system. Everything needs to speak to each other because, like you said, no one wants to be rekeying information in twice. I don't like doing it. I was doing a form last night and I was like, oh, I've already added this information. Why are they making me do it again on a different sheet? And it's exactly the same. Like, time is precious. And even for support staff, so even if you've got support staff helping you, they could be doing something else rather than rekeying information to have to. So I think case management system and ID and V providers, it's really important that integration is available because they don't want to be doing that. They don't, like you said, the error that can happen in those sorts of situations where there is an additional rekey of information. So for me, integration is definitely key.
So let me throw this at you guys then. So if integration is key and you need that interconnectivity between techs, do you prefer an orchestration platform, one sandbox mode that has all of these points in it, screening, KYB, KYC, it's already in it? Or do you prefer different solutions that have direct APIs to each other?
Probably unfair for me to answer that question.
I think if there's someone out there that's doing one particular thing really well, then I think law firms would be quite happy to integrate with lots of different technology, as long as they all speak to each other. I think that's the key here. It doesn't matter what tech you've got. You could have quite a bit large tech stack, but if everything's talking to each other and giving you a streamlined process, then it doesn't really matter. But I think it depends. Like, it's nice to have a one for all, isn't it? Where you don't need to do that, because it can be a little bit less painful. I think that would definitely depend on the law firm and what they're looking for, because it could be that they might find one piece of technology that works absolutely great for them, but it could be that actually they haven't been able to find that, so they go off and they integrate with lots of different.
I do think transparency here is quite key as well, because I think I mentioned it earlier, being the one provider, explaining to the firms where the data is coming from so you can actually be that one provider. And I think that's what's opened up our conversations. We've been very transparent with firms to say, you've already got contracts with 3 providers and we can plug them into our orchestration tool. That makes them feel, okay, they're used to the data, they've got the contracts in place. What we're trying to do is give them that kind of orchestration workflow, that onboarding product. And it can sit outside of an ERP, or it can push the data back in. So but again, I think transparency of they want to feel comfortable, excuse me, where the data is actually coming from.
Yeah, and I think Alicia pointed this out about the FCA. That's going to be really important for you to know those sources of data as well. Really important. And I think, and sometimes I really struggle to get that information from tech companies. Like, yeah, but where are you getting that information from? And then they don't even know. So which can be quite worrying. So I think those understanding what your tech provider, where they're gathering their data from, is going to be really, really important. You need to understand that. So if you don't know, go and find out.
Alicia, did you want to come in here and add a few words on that as well?
I think it's really also important that the right people are looking at the products as well. It's quite obvious that IT are heavily involved in looking at products, but you need to be getting the people that are using it involved, because yes, the product may be shiny and fit for their purpose, but is it actually fit for the purpose of the people using it? I've started getting heavily involved in operations and the contracts with the providers to make sure actually, does this product work for the firm? Does it work for the type of work you are carrying out in the firm? Because a lot of the products you buy are white label, you get them, and then you need to tailor them to fit your business. And I think it's just really important to get the right people involved. You know, there is a cost when you buy products, so let's get the right ones in. Let's get the ones that actually improve the process.
Cool. Going to move to the next point, which is really to try to change, to make a change, to make any sort of improvement without the embedding cultural way of thinking into the firm is quite impossible in a law firm, right? You can implement a new legal tech, RegTech, but you know the percentage of usage on that tool might be like 10% or less of total fee earners. So getting people to think a certain way is really important. So I wanted to know how do you guys see the importance of risk-wide thinking inside the firm? Not thinking of compliance as a burden, but thinking of it as I'm going to be a better lawyer if I do this.
Yeah, I think culture is still quite a big issue within law firms. But I think it's getting better, definitely getting better, the culture of compliance. People are, I think the key here, and I think Alicia, again, you picked this up, is training, making sure that people have the right training so they actually understand why they're doing what they do. One of the first things I'll say in my training sessions are, why do we do AML checks? And they're all like, oh, because we don't want to go to prison. You know, and it's just like breaking it down and like explaining them to them. And I was like, okay, why do you go to prison? And they're like, oh, because you know, it's the law. Like, you're breaking the law. Okay, why is it the law? You know, I'm really like big, and they just look at me blank, and I'm like, because it's bad. Money laundering is bad. You know, and really taking it back to that human element of saying, actually, you know, this is why we're doing these checks. It's a really horrible thing that happens. But not only that, I think sometimes staff think that, you know, the buck stops with the MLRO, so the money laundering reporting officer. And I'm like, hang about, guys, wait a minute there. No, actually, you could breach the money laundering regulations and you could get into trouble for that. If you don't report suspicion, you can be in trouble for that. So I think it's just really making them understand why it's so important. And training is really key in helping with that culture of compliance. I think also as well being open to conversations, not just saying like it's one way, it's my way or the highway. You know, making sure that there's an open door policy. You know, I think most people would be more than happy to go and speak to Alicia because she's friendly, she's bubbly. You know, they don't feel like they're going to have a door slammed in their face. So I think that's really important as well.
I definitely think compliance and being approachable is definitely key. So a lot of the stuff that I've done from legal sector, so my team do hot desking. So you'll find a compliance person popped up somewhere, and you know, it's not because we're trying to spy on fear. It's just, I think when I started, it was very interesting to see compliance sat in a corner and not really engaging with the business. But I want people to understand we're your safety net. We're here to help. We're here to support you. And I'd rather hear about things that are going wrong than finding them, because if you find them and people are burying them and hiding them, you know, they're harder for us to. It definitely also, for the culture piece, it has to come from the top down. The buy-in needs to come from the top down. The message needs to be set across the board that compliance isn't a necessary evil. It is part and parcel of the, you know, the business, and we want people to engage with it, because like Kaylee said, the buck doesn't stop with me. You know, the buck is your responsibility. Fee earners, it's your practicing certificates, and you know, the compliance team, all we are trying to do is make sure that, you know, if the SRA do come knocking, you know, we can stand up and be next to them. I have done a lot on training as well. Training, definitely. It was quite interesting to see that training is something that people don't necessarily like to do, but making it engaging. You know, I've had escape rooms. I've had what other training pieces? I've done quite a lot of training pieces in my time, because I think not everybody learns the same way. Have it engaging, get scenarios out there. You know, it's, you know, people want to hear about it if things are happening. So training is is definitely an avenue that you can use to your advantage and get people thinking about risk. I think there is that misconception that the only risk is AML, but there's so many risks to businesses that actually getting people to understand risk is actually fundamental.
I agree. And I think some of the training there can be picked up by the providers, because they should be the specialists in a lot of the products that have been pushing into the firms. I from another angle, law firms are under a huge amount of pressure, but from the regulators, from a client to standardize their onboarding, not just from a compliance perspective, but also to improve the client experience, but also operational efficiencies. We're seeing a lot of law firms centralize the risk and compliance support, looking for that single digital platform to support a true data source, keeping the AML process as robust as possible. And then obviously global as well, making sure that you've got that view where you've got a provider that can do this globally. But yeah, I definitely like the training part. I think that is key.
Yeah, and I do actually recommend to a lot of my firms, especially if they have got legacy tech, to reach out to their technology provider and ask for some updated training. It's probably likely that they've had a lot of new things happen over the years that they might not know about. They might not know how it works. So they could actually be, making their processes even better, just by reaching out and asking for this little bit of training.
Awesome, guys. I will breeze through a couple of questions for you, so please keep your answers within 30 seconds, or I will interrupt very rudely.
Terrible.
So,
God, time pressures for me. It's not good.
Centralized versus decentralized process. Are both viable options, or is one of them the evolution of the other?
I don't think so. I think there are some firms that actually the fee earners maybe aren't taking AML seriously enough, and if you remove them from the process completely, then that's going to be a bigger issue. So making sure that your fee earners understand it first, and then taking a route to go centralized is probably a better way of doing it, because if you take it away from them in the back of their mind, they're like, well, we don't have to think about this anymore because we've got a centralized team that deals with it.
For me, it'd be keeping them part of the process.
What you do is part of the process. So you don't take everything away, but you take part of it. So, compliance people are specialists in their own right. So if they specialize in certain areas, let them focus on the bit they need to present you with everything you need so they can make a risk-based approach on the data being provided with. So centralization makes part of the process, but not all of it.
Mark, did you want to add there, or shall we go to
No, it was just for me, it was very similar to what Kelly says, keeping them in that process. They are still specialists, but if you don't, it can be forgotten about. So
cool. We were going to talk about some FCA changes and what we learned about the latest kind of guidance that was provided. Kaylee, I think you've read on it, and Alicia, you're an expert in this field. Do you want to talk about just high level, not going too much into because that could be a whole webinar, right? What can firms expect with the latest changes?
So I think one of the things that we spoke about earlier is the data. So data is going to be key. You're not going to be having that once a year AML questionnaire going around. I think, as Alicia knows, it's going to be more likely to be quarterly that they're going to be coming to you and asking you for information. So to really get ahead of the game, what you could be doing now is really looking into your data sets. Where does your data come from? And making sure that you can have that readily available to you. Like how many PEPs, how many high-risk third countries, how many high-risk clients, how many high-risk matters. All of that sort of data you want to have readily available to you for when they come knocking. But I think Alicia's probably better talking about this than me because she's worked with the FCA.
It is definitely a governance piece. So like Kaylee said, it's not going to be a questionnaire annually. You have to be embedding this. This needs to be part and parcel of compliance. Keeping your data up to date. I would expect regular audits from the FCA. I know from my time in insurance, I was audited monthly. So I think would be speculating at this point because no information has been released, but I think start preparing your data, start looking at your governance pieces, and it will just help you for when the changes do come into place.
And also utilising our experience of working
Mark,
in
got anything to
utilising our experience of also working in financial services. Automation and onboarding is not just about bringing clients through the door quicker, it's also about tracking that audit trail and perpetual monitoring on KYB and KYC. So the heavy lifting there should be done for you. And I think that's where, we look at automation as just bringing businesses on quicker and faster, but it does give you a very detailed digital audit trail, which I think should help. We've lost you, Arsalan.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're back.
The magical mute button. I was just gonna finally get to the actual point, right? People are asking us, get to the point. Why are the top law firms prioritizing onboarding now? I'll give you 3 reasons, and I'd love to hear a couple of reasons from everybody's side. One is time loss. So they want to recoup all the time that they're losing from the manual processes as described here. 2 is saving money from fragmented costs of tech stacks. They're using 3 to 4 tech stacks. We're talking smart search for basic smart screening, KYB, fourth for EIDV, something else for risk assessment. It's too much and it costs them a lot of money. And then 3rd is client experience. They're improving it because clients expect, especially corporate clients, have a very high degree of expectation because they work with banks, they work with investors, they see how slick the processes are there, and then they work with a law firm, and then they realize this is not up to par. So that's my kind of top 3 priorities of why, when I speak with firms, they're really looking at onboarding as opposed to CRMs or other projects. So I'd love to hear, Alicia, maybe what are your top reasons why firms are prioritizing it now?
I think for me, it's first impressions matter. Sets the tone from the start. Like you said, there's an expectation on corporate clients, what they expect from businesses. They don't want duplication. They don't want to be repeating themselves. If they provided you something in 9 months ago, why isn't it stored centrally so it can be used again? So KYC isn't repeated. So they're not wasting their time. Time is precious. Efficiencies. So all of those types of things are reasons why onboarding is so important to businesses.
I think a lot of it as well, and I know law firms are really trying to be better, but I think a lot of law firms are scared because of all the fines that have been coming out from the SRA. So I think that probably has a little bit of something to do with why people are prioritizing onboarding clients. But I do feel like once they've got over that hurdle, in the sense of, we want to, and a lot of firms are like, we want to use technology because they're going to help us get it right. We're unlikely to miss something, we're unlikely to get it wrong. It's going to be more of a standardized process. And I think once they get over the whole, they started off doing this because they didn't want to get fined by the SRA. They actually then go into the whole, actually, this is a good thing because this is making our processes more slick. This is better for our clients. This is better for our fee earners. I think sometimes, there is like, and I do feel like sometimes law firms panic buy as well. So like everyone's using like electronic verification. We need to find someone now, and they just like see one provider and then just buy it because it's like a panic. But I do feel that law firms now are actually seeing the benefits of it and actually seeing other law firms. So that some law firms that aren't, it's quite incestuous, isn't it? The legal sector, everyone kind of knows everyone, and they're starting to see other law firms using this technology and getting on with it, and making the processes better for them. So as well, they're thinking, maybe we should think about doing this as well.
I think from our perspective, we've just done a video with Kennedy's, and their pure reasons were to reduce that compliance risk. That was one of their biggest reasons. And the other one was actually growth. They want to grow the firm, remaining with the headcount that they've got. So technology powering that growth. They were the 2 standouts.
I think it was data visibility as well, Mark, when they said you get a greater whole of a data point when you connect all of these together. There's a greater sum that you unlock, wasn't it?
It was. And obviously they've got that digital audit trail as well. But yeah,
Okay.
some good points.
So, guys, we have 15 minutes for Q&A. So we've left kind of till 12:15 to answer a bunch of questions. We do have some fixed questions that had come in from unknown sources. But for now, there's a couple of comments that I'm going to reveal for you guys from the chat. And we're just going to talk over them. If there's a question, please answer it. If not, just make a comment or two. Vicky Simpson said, unfortunately, there's still a lot of silo mentality in law. And I think everybody here can speak on that, right? Alicia, do you feel like in Gately, departments are still working in silos completely on their own?
And there still is a lot of that. And I think that's key to have the right people in the compliance area so that they can break down those barriers. As I mentioned earlier, hot desking, I think making yourself available, getting people to understand what you're doing just helps change the mindset. But I do notice there is still a lot of silo working happening across the board.
I think I agree, and I think this can be picked up by bringing these different departments within a firm together, finding out exactly what they need to be able to perform at their roles, and bring them in with a product that can fit all. But yeah, we're definitely seeing it with different areas.
I think some firms have like compliance champions, don't they, in each department to try and fix that, and try and hopefully help bring everyone together. Yeah, it is a lot. You know, they turn up to the training and all the departments sit within their own departments. You know, you can go along the line and say, what department are you in? And everyone, you know, they're all sat together. And I think as well, coming back to the whole, you know, being able to upsell, or to, you know, knowing your client well enough to be able to upsell, or to know that they need a will, or to know, like, that's really important for you to have good relationships with lots of people within the firm, so that straight away you can go, oh, I've got this lovely client, and you know, they're buying a property and now they want to have a will, and you want to hand it over to someone that you trust and that you know, to be able to do that within the firm. So making sure those relationships are built is quite important.
Yeah. And
there's a lot of
videos on our
sorry.
We did some videos on our SharePoint site, which was Meet the Teams, because it was so interesting to see how many areas of law didn't actually know what the other areas of law offered. So again, to help build those, you know, upselling or cross-selling piece, because actually if you work for a law firm that offers a lot of services, you can buy their house, deal with their divorce, write their will, but because these teams are not necessarily working together or not understanding what other teams offer, you know, these pieces aren't done, and people are going to other law firms to go and get these things done. But if you can house it all under one roof, then why aren't you? That's sort of brilliant for a law firm to be able to offer all of those services to that one client.
Good point.
What were you going to say, Matt, on that one?
I was actually going to say the responsibility, and with the silo mentality, somebody picking up the hat of the MLRO all the time. There's a lot of responsibility generally left on one individual, and I think that's why it's important to start getting these departments to speak together.
Amazing. Thank you all for that. Michael Shaw, legendary, says, my wife works in wills and probate, and their department had a better return rate than their conveyancing team, which is quite an interesting comment. Anyone wants to comment on that, or should we move on?
Well, there could be so many reasons to laugh at that.
Cool. Well, there's a bunch of comments, so it's not all of them are questions, so I'll just read some of them. If you feel like you want to respond, just interrupt me, please. Stuart Young mentioned this link that he provided are currently working on standards for business and corporate EIDV. Stuart, if you want to leave more or elaborate further, that'd be great. Pierre mentioned, totally agreed that there's not one miracle solution on the market. Interoperability and connection is a key factor for success. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I think that was about the integration piece, wasn't it? I think that's probably what that comment was on. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah.
Karen.
I think it is a good point, and that's why it's very it's very important for them to understand that you have to bring other partners into that orchestration onboarding. It can be delivered via one channel, but the businesses may still want to take multiple APIs to use them in a different way.
One thing Aventine Lab is working on, and this is top secret, so keep it between us and
It's
the
not
webinar.
now.
we want to introduce the idea of a group RegTechs going into pitches. So a bank cannot be satisfied with one RegTech; it's impossible. They have behavior team, fraud team, bunch of teams, right? So it makes sense having a group of 5 to 10 RegTechs that are partners together, API partners, and they pitch together as a collective, because that's a lot more realistic. Here we have Luke saying regulators is more and more pushing for perpetual AML KYC. How's the legal profession dealing with this?
Absolutely agree. And it will become even more apparent when the FCA start looking at this in more detail. But again, monitoring KYB, monitoring KYC is going to be at the forefront. And there's plenty of technology out there that can do this. It's been done in a lot of other industries already. It does feel like there's a little bit of catching up to do.
Any other thoughts on perpetual KYC AML? Cool. Just for me, it's good to have a vendor that has a little reminder button. So let's say you risk Arslan as high risk. You could have in the settings tab saying all my high risks. Remind me in 3 months to onboard them again, re-verify them again.
Yeah.
So that's a nice little option there.
I think it's even more important that these alerts are pushed to you. You're not having to go in and look for them. You're more proactive with monitoring alerts being sent to you rather than you having to log into a portfolio every day. And that just brings that, it's all around that efficiency side of it. You really only want to be acting on these alerts if it's detrimental to your firm. You get to set the risk on that as well.
That's why it's really important that these alerts actually tell you what they're for.
Agree.
I think sometimes, or like, there's been a director change. Okay, which director, when, who, wow, hi, like, tell me everything about this. If you're going to be more efficient, then they're the sorts of things that you want to know, if technology is going to be able to help you with those sorts of things. But I think when it comes to corporate client due diligence, it is really tricky to keep on top of that. And especially if it's international, because in the UK, most tech providers can tap into company house API, so it's quite easy. When it comes to international data, that's a completely different ballgame, and can be quite tricky. So I think KYB is big up there, especially I would say in tech companies. They're really looking into it and how they can solve this problem, because it is a massive pain point for law firms.
Thank you for that. We have Stuart here. Is there enough trust and reliance between law firms if a customer has one high-value identity in a digital wallet?
I think I covered that one earlier. If they've only got one form of identity in a digital wallet, then is that enough? If you're looking at people overseas, it's not going to help you onboard people overseas. It's really fixed to the UK at the moment, and I'm sure it's going to be global. But that's where I see that as a challenge. If you start an automated workflow and you're going to rely on a digital wallet, what's going to happen with the people that haven't got a digital wallet? So keeping that open, you keep it as an option. So you start an onboarding form with multiple options. If they've got that, fantastic. If they haven't, you just open that up. And the technology that we have at Red Flag and other providers have, you can give them multiple choice documents to load to the system. You can collect 2 in that same journey if you wanted to.
I don't think it's really about trust and reliance. I think it's about what their risk appetite is as a law firm. So different law firms will have different risk appetites. So some law firms might be happy to accept that, but other law firms be like, no way, we're not accepting that. And that all comes down to, the type of the firm's firm-wide risk assessment, and how they assess risk and what their approach to risk is. So that one is it kind of depends, really.
Alicia?
Yeah, no, I would agree. It's dependent on the firm. It isn't trust. Different types of work, you'd want more stuff, less stuff. So I think you just have the right workflow. So creating the right workflow for the different types of work will just help assist you with making sure that the data that you do obtain is the right data and the data that you can process as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
I think with digital wallets, it's the quality of the data that's going in originally. So if the quality is shit, digital wallet breaks as a whole. The concept is just useless. So how do you ensure as a vendor, if you have a digital wallet, what's getting through, if it is that one identity, how do you make sure that it is, okay, we verified that identity, it is true. But I genuinely think it's the future. Currently, you can say the government should do it. The government should just do Companies House and EIDV. You could say no, every company should do it. Should during onboarding do an EIDV check. But we're just throwing the responsibility on everybody but the person who needs to keep up to date with their own profile and their own portfolio of KYB, KYC. I've seen some really good solutions. One is called I think Seymour, but they're launching soon. But essentially, you will be able to upload your KYB, update your KYB structure, and as soon as you update your structure in your portfolio there, it will update it along every person who's ever onboarded you. So all the law firms, all the banks will have their KYB updated simultaneously if there's a shareholding changes, and they will have them screened. They will have all the good stuff happen to them on the back end. So I do think that we will get to a point where digital wallets in 20 years' time will be slick. But right now, we're just throwing the responsibility on anybody but the person going through the onboarding. Any thoughts on that? No worries. Just a little rant from my. I do these little rants. This is a good question. Will the government-backed national ID scheme not solve these problems that we're speaking of?
I don't know enough about it to comment on it, I'm afraid.
Yes, still fairly, still fairly new, and I don't think it will solve the problems because again, one document is just in the UK for law firms dealing outside of the UK. How you're going to deal with that? And again, I'll say you can have a journey built for people who have national IDs, who are on the national ID scheme, and you can build a journey for people who don't. So you'll still be able to onboard both.
Awesome. Alicia, any thoughts on this? Companies House introducing EIDV. Will this help firms, or what do you think this adds?
I'm going to have to say, I think there's not enough out there yet to understand if it will help. I would like to hope that it will, but I think the proof will be in the pudding. So I think once it's out and is doing what it needs to do, we'll be able to see it will improve things.
We can hope, right? I think I'm hoping it will improve the stopping of mass registrations from Chinese entities overseas.
It absolutely will. Slightly different to the national ID scheme. But yeah, making all directors, PSCs, UBOs share their documentation with Companies House will prevent fraud to a certain extent.
The national ID scheme is not the same as the Companies House ID verification.
No, Stuart will probably be able to confirm that, but absolutely not. No. So the Transparency Act, which is, I think it's, actually went live today, 18th of November. There we go. So yes, businesses have another 12 months now to register all their directors, PSCs and UBOs. They all have to go through an IDV with a preempted ACSP provider.
Apologies for that mix-up, by the way. I mean,
that's why you've got the experts on the call.
Exactly, and I'm humble enough to never blag it, and that's a key here. There's a bunch of questions. I'm going to breeze through them. Hopefully, it's 12:15. Do you guys have a few minutes more just to go through bunch, or do you have to go?
I'm okay.
You're okay. Alicia, you look like you have to be somewhere.
No, you've got 2 minutes, so
2 minutes.
hit
Cool.
me.
There's loads of SaaS software, but they often do not address the client experience broadly, i.e., beyond the company that implements the SaaS. Mark, Alicia, Kaylee, any thoughts?
I think technology is actually trying to look at the client experience as a whole at the moment by things like, having document upload So then looking at the process as a whole, we need to send a client engagement letter out. We need to ID and V them. We need to send, we need money to come in. There's so many technology companies that can actually pull all of that into one workflow, is what we would call it, in technology, one workflow. So that one email gets sent to the client requesting all of that data. And then also it's really great because you can see where they're at in the process. So in the background, you can have a look and see, oh, they've been stuck on this for, 10 days. Maybe I need to go and check in on them and see if there's anything that they're struggling with. I do think that they are trying to address client experience, definitely, in terms of how they do things.
And living
on
and
that
breathing.
workflow, you can add in automation like chasers and all of those pieces, which historically somebody would have had to go into their Outlook or whatever emails and chase, whereas actually it's consistency. And also I can see it's helping improving getting monies back in as well, because a lot of companies are using it for chase for bills to be paid, etc. So I do think that if you use the products well and all the tools that are available on it, they can really help streamline a number of processes.
Yeah, and I agree. Living, eating, breathing this part of it. We're definitely seeing firms ask more about the client experience. It used to be just about onboarding, but now it's more about that client experience as well.
Cool. And then Stuart mentions Apple introduces digital ID, a new way to create present ID in an Apple Wallet, which I think is fascinating in the future of how things go. Guys, thank you so much for viewing, engaging, participating. Huge shout out to our guests here, top experts. Please reach out to Kaylee if you need any consulting on AML, compliance, onboarding, audit, all the good stuff related to compliance and legal. Alicia is one of the most knowledgeable and top experts I've come across in this sector. So reach out to her if you need any questions. And Mark, do you want to mention a few words about Red Flag as well? What you guys do and who you service?
Absolutely. Obviously, we work with a lot of law firms in the UK. We deal with anything from KYB to KYC, total automation, plenty of data providers within our tech stack, which help us deliver that product. So yeah, if anybody wants to reach out to us, there'll be plenty of links within the LinkedIn profile. So reach out.
And parting comments and thoughts from Alicia and Kaylee.
Oh, thanks everyone. I love to talk about these sorts of things.
Yeah,
so nothing much, but thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thanks for having me as well. No, it's been great.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for commenting and watching, and we'll see you next time, hopefully in a few weeks or a few months, or never say never. I don't know when to see you next, but thank you guys. Cheers.
Thanks a lot, all. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.